The Silent Territory. The Galactic Map was the pride of the Galactic Mapping Authority, GMA, a living testament to thousands of years of exploration, trade, and conquest. The vast voids between stars had been meticulously charted, nebula catalogued, and every known sentient species accounted for. The authority had stretched its influence across the spiral arms of the galaxy, weaving together civilizations into a grand cosmic network. But there was one place where the map simply ended. A dark, unmarked void spanning 12,000 light-years, right where human space began. Senior cartographer Zeithbar stared at the projection before him, his brow furrowed in frustration. His 4 digits drummed against the control panel as he flicked through centuries of records. As a Valyrian, his crystalline skin subtly reflected the dim glow of the holographic display, his 3 hearts pulsing a steady rhythm of curiosity and concern. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered to himself. The GNA had mapped over 97% of the known galaxy, yet no successful cartographic mission had returned with reliable data on human space. Every attempt had either ended in catastrophic failure, inexplicable data corruption, or eerie silence. The record showed dozens of unverified reports, ships vanishing without a trace, automated probes returning with garbled information, and, in rare cases, vessels limping back to known space with their crews suffering from psychological distress. Humans were not an ancient race. They had not expanded into the stars with the overwhelming power of the Valyrian Empire or the collective efficiency of the Halton Collective. By all accounts, they were latecomers, a species that had gone from primitive spaceflight to interstellar control in less than a century. It should not have been possible. Director Orrin, a high-ranking Valyrian administrator, entered the chamber with the regal grace of someone who had spent centuries in bureaucratic command. His translucent body pulsed a faint blue, a sign of mild irritation. "Cartographer Barr," he said, his voice smooth yet firm. "I assume you have a valid reason for this summons." Zeith straightened, pressing his case. "Director, I have compiled a report on all previous attempts to map human space. 17 separate missions. None returned with complete data. Some ships disappeared entirely. Others suffered critical system failures. 3 returned with their crews, broken." Orrin's crystalline eyes narrowed. "And your point?" "With respect, sir, this is an anomaly unlike any other in recorded history. No other sovereign species refuses to allow basic cartography. The Diraxians permitted it despite their religious strictures. Even the Excellenor, who exist in a permanent state of paranoia, allowed controlled mapping of their systems. Only the humans enforce complete secrecy." Orrin's skin darkened in hue, signaling rising frustration. "The Galactic Council made special provisions for Earth and its colonies. We do not question those decisions." "But why?" Zeith pressed. "What could they be hiding? Or worse, what could they be protecting us from?" A long silence stretched between them. Orrin's form flickered as he exhaled in a slow, calculated breath. "This conversation is over, cartographer." Zeith knew he had crossed a line, but the fire of his curiosity had already taken root. He would not stop. That night, in the solitude of his private research station, he accessed restricted historical archives. Before humanity's formal induction into the galactic community, ships had freely traveled through what was now designated as human space. Records showed lush, resource-rich worlds, habitable planets that should have been prime real estate for interstellar expansion. And then, something changed. Roughly 300 years ago, reports took a sudden, disturbing turn. Vessels experienced unexplained malfunctions. Crews reported sensory hallucinations, missing time, and a growing unease that bordered on fear. As time passed, fewer ships dared to venture into those sectors, and when humanity finally appeared on the galactic stage, the area had already been sealed off. No species had contested their claim. No wars were fought over the space. The Galactic Council had simply accepted it. Zeith leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. This wasn't just about territorial sovereignty. This was about something much bigger, something no one dared to explain. His decision was made. He would find out the truth. It took him 3 months to assemble a team. He needed specialists, people who would not ask too many questions, but were skilled enough to handle whatever lay ahead. Krev Dorn, a propulsion engineer with a reputation for modifying ships beyond regulation limits. He could adjust their vessel's energy signature, making them harder to detect. Thea Sin, a xenoanthropologist, had spent decades studying emergent civilizations and their unique social structures. If there was an underlying reason for human secrecy, she would find it. Morovex, a former security officer and combat specialist. He had worked across the outer colonies, dealing with everything from pirate ambushes to diplomatic conflicts. If things went wrong, they would need him. And finally, Lenar, his research assistant. She was skeptical of this mission, but Zeeth knew he would need her analytical mind. Their vessel, the Stellar Inquiry, was officially assigned to survey an unrelated sector 2 systems away from human space. Once they were beyond the prying eyes of the GMA, Krev would engage the modifications that would conceal their true trajectory. As the ship's engines hummed beneath their feet, Zeeth felt a thrill of anticipation. They were about to enter the unknown, a place no one else had dared to go. Approaching the boundary of human territorial space, Lenar announced, switching to passive sensors. The view screen revealed nothing but the vast emptiness of space. No warning beacons, no defensive satellites, no patrol ships. Strange, Thea murmured. Most species mark their borders clearly. Perhaps they don't need to, Morovex said darkly. They crossed the threshold. Immediately, the ship's sensors flickered. Gravity fluctuated in subtle, unnatural ways. The quantum positioning system displayed nonsensical coordinates, as though space itself had shifted. Krud frowned at his console. Something's interfering with our instruments. His scaled fingers danced across the controls. These aren't normal distortions. It's like deliberate interference. Zeeth felt a chill run through him. The eerie emptiness, the silence, the distortions. It all felt intentional. They proceeded cautiously, documenting everything. On the 3rd day, they detected something. A station. Small, unassuming, orbiting an unremarkable moon deep within human space. It was the first sign of artificial structures they had encountered. Are they aware of us? Lenar asked. Unclear, Thea said, analyzing the readings. But look at this. Their technology is peculiar. Some of it is incredibly advanced, possibly beyond even Valyrian standards. But other aspects seem primitive. Krev finished. Exactly. Zeeth leaned forward, staring at the station on the screen. The first real clue in this mystery. But then, without warning, the ship's lights flickered. A chilling message appeared on the main console. You should not be here. Silence filled the cabin. No distress signal had been sent. No external scans had detected them. Yet someone, something, knew they were there. Zeeth's throat went dry. We've been seen. The Forbidden Watchers. A deathly silence filled the control room of the Stellar Inquiry. The message flickered on the main console, the simple yet chilling text standing stark against the blackness of space. You should not be here. No transmission source. No known frequency. No signal logs. The message had simply appeared. Zeethbar forced himself to breathe, his 3 hearts hammering against his crystalline ribcage. He glanced around at his crew. Lenar's feathered crest was raised in alarm, her sharp eyes darting between the screens. Krev Dorn's scaled fingers twitched over the controls, as if resisting the urge to start running diagnostics. Morovex had already rested a hand on his sidearm. A useless gesture in the void of space, but a sign of his honed instincts. Thea Sen was the first to break the silence. No detectable transmission source, she asked, her voice calm but tight. Lenar shook her head. Nothing. The sensors didn't pick up a signal. It's like the message was written inside our system. Zeeth frowned. That's impossible. Our systems are isolated. Even the GMA doesn't have the capability to remotely inject data like this. Morovec grunted. Well, someone just did. The station loomed in the distance, small and unassuming, orbiting a lifeless moon. There were no signs of activity, no docking ports, no beacon signals, not even the faint hum of energy emissions that typically accompanied artificial structures. It was as if it were abandoned, or waiting. Zeeth turned to Krev. Can you analyze the message? Any digital signature? Any trace? Krev's reptilian eyes narrowed. I can try. But if this is human tech, we might not even recognize its methods. His fingers danced over the controls, running deep system scans. Minutes passed. The quiet hum of the ship's systems was the only sound. Then Krev cursed under his breath. What? Zeeth pressed. Krev turned his screen around, displaying a chaotic mess of symbols. I tried to extract the message's metadata. Who sent it? How it got into our system. But this is what I found. The characters were jagged, almost fractal in nature, shifting as though they were alive. They were unlike any known galactic language, their patterns unnerving to look at. That's not human, Lenar murmured. Or if it is, Morovec added grimly. They'd been hiding a hell of a lot more than we thought. Zeeth felt a growing weight in his chest. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about restricted territory. It wasn't about political sovereignty. It was something else entirely. The decision. We should turn back, Thea said finally. This message isn't a warning. It's a statement. They know we're here, and they're letting us know. Morovec crossed his arms, or they're daring us to continue. Zeeth stared at the station, his mind racing. Every instinct told him that something was wrong, that they had already gone too far. And yet, we came here for answers, he said. We're not leaving without them. Lenar sighed. I knew you'd say that. Krev exhaled sharply. Then we better do this carefully. Zeeth turned back to the view screen. Approach the station, but keep a minimum energy profile. No transmissions, no unnecessary power signatures. Let's see what we're dealing with. The stellar inquiry glided forward, silent as a ghost. The closer they got, the more the unease grew. The station was old. Not just years or decades, but centuries. Its metal surface was worn and scarred, as though it had endured ages of neglect. It was a design they did not recognize, neither wholly human nor entirely alien. Scanning for life signs, Thea reported. A moment passed, then another. No signs of biological life. But she hesitated. There's power. Krebs' eyes snapped to her. That's impossible. There are no external energy emissions. If it was powered, we'd see it. Well, I'm seeing it now, Thea replied. It's faint, deep in the core of the structure. It's almost hidden. Morovec exhaled. This is a terrible idea. Zeeth ignored him. Prepare to dock. The station. The stellar inquiry latched onto the station's docking clamps with a quiet hiss. The airlock cycled, a deep mechanical groan vibrating through the ship. The team stood at the threshold, clad in reinforced suits, weapons holstered but ready. The silence was deafening. Stay close, Zeeth ordered as the hatch slid open. The interior was worse than he expected. The walls were covered in markings, deep, erratic carvings that twisted and curved in nonsensical patterns. Symbols, some resembling the message on their console, others completely foreign. The station smelled of dust and metal, and the air was thick with the weight of abandonment. No signs of struggle, Thea observed, but this place wasn't built for standard operations. Look at the design. No crew quarters, no supply storage. Lenar traced a hand over one of the carvings. This wasn't a research outpost, either. Morovec stepped ahead, weapon drawn. Then what the hell was it? They'd ventured deeper. The corridors were long and dark, twisting in unnatural ways. The deeper they went, the more warped the architecture became, as if the station itself had been shaped by something beyond conventional design. Then they found it. A chamber at the core of the station, and at its center, a single console, still active, glowing with a dull pulsing light. Zeeth approached cautiously. Krev, the engineer, moved beside him, scanning the console. It's strange. The technology is advanced, but the interface is simplistic. Zeeth hesitated, then reached out, pressing his fingers against the console. It activated instantly. The room was flooded with light, and suddenly, the walls were alive with movement. The carvings shifted, morphing into images. Recordings. The first showed a human fleet, small, barely beyond planetary travel, venturing into deep space. Then, something else. Something massive. A shadow in the void. The second recording showed a battle. Humans fighting against an enemy that the system refused to display, as if its very existence was an anomaly. The third. Zeeth's breath caught. The third recording was of the station itself, and standing inside it was them. His blood ran cold. A low, humming sound filled the air, like a distant voice whispering through the metal. Then the message changed. You should not be here. The station trembled, and suddenly, Zeeth understood. This place wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. The forgotten morning. The station trembled beneath their feet, the walls groaning as if something deep within had awakened. Zeeth Bar forced himself to remain steady, his crystalline hands curling into fists. The others were frozen in place, eyes locked onto the console as the message pulsed across the screen. You should not be here. But it wasn't the words that terrified Zeeth the most. It was the recording, the image of themselves standing exactly where they were now. It was as if the station had foreseen their arrival. A new sound filled the air, soft, rhythmic, like an ancient heartbeat reverberating through the metal structure. It was coming from somewhere deep within the station, pulsing in sync with the flickering console. Krev Dorn broke the silence first, his scaled fingers flying across his portable scanner. I'm picking up an energy surge. It's coming from below us. Directly beneath this chamber. Morovex's grip tightened on his weapon. We need to leave. Now. We can't. Lenar whispered, her feathered crest pressed low against her skull. This place isn't just a relic. It's alive. Zeeth turned back to the console, his mind racing. The recordings had shown the past, a past that no one in the galaxy seemed to remember. Humanity at war with something unseen. And now, the station was responding to their presence, as if it had been waiting for them all along. The humans didn't just restrict access to this region. Thea said, her voice barely above a whisper. They buried something here. Zeeth's jaw tightened, and we just woke it up. The descent. The station trembled again, more violently this time. The lights overhead flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the twisted walls. Then, as if guided by an unseen force, the floor beneath them began to shift. Panels retracted, revealing a passage leading downward. Lenar took a cautious step toward it. It wants us to go deeper. Morovex shook his head. That's the worst idea I've ever heard. Zeeth knew Morovex was right. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to run before whatever lay beneath swallowed them whole. But something deeper within him, something primal, refused to back down. This was why they had come, to uncover the truth. We have to see what's down there, he said, stepping forward. Morovex muttered a curse but fell into step beside him. The others followed in silence, each step echoing down the narrow corridor as they descended. The deeper they went, the more unnatural the space became. The metal walls no longer bore the markings of a simple station. They were shifting, warping in ways that defied logic. It was as if the station was rewriting itself in real time. Then suddenly, the corridor opened into a vast chamber, and at its center stood the impossible. The vault. A massive structure loomed before them, an obsidian monolith embedded deep within the heart of the station. It pulsed with an eerie blue glow, the same rhythmic hum reverberating from within its core. Unlike the rest of the station, this structure bore no signs of age. It was untouched, pristine, as if it had been placed here only moments ago. Zeeth stepped forward, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. What is this? Krev was already scanning it, his fingers flying over his device. His eyes widened. This isn't human technology. It's not Valyrian. It's something else entirely. Thea approached cautiously, her gaze locked onto the monolith. It's not just an object. It's a containment unit. Lennar turned to her sharply. A prison. Zeeth's pulse quickened. The recordings had shown humans fighting an unseen force, an enemy so dangerous that no record of it remained. And now, here they stood, in front of a structure hidden away in the depths of a forbidden station. Something was inside, and it was still alive. The awakening. Without warning, the monolith pulsed brighter. The ground beneath them shuddered, and a piercing sound filled the air. A voice, ancient and distorted, echoing inside their minds. You have come too soon. Zeeth staggered back, gripping his head as the voice reverberated through his skull. The others were experiencing it too. Krev had dropped to his knees. Thea clutched at her temples, and even Morovec, the most hardened among them, had gone pale. Then, the monolith split open. A crack formed down its center, light pouring from within. The air grew heavy, charged with an energy unlike anything Zeeth had ever felt before. Then, something moved. A figure began to emerge, its shape obscured by the blinding glow. It was humanoid, yet wrong. Its limbs too elongated, its form shifting as if it were struggling to exist in their reality. Lennar gasped. That's not human. The figure took a step forward, and as it did, the entire station seemed to react. Walls twisting, lights flickering, the air itself vibrating with a deep, resonant hum. Zeeth forced himself to speak. Who are you? The figure lifted its head, revealing eyes that burned with a cold, unnatural light. You should not be here. Zeeth's breath hitched. The same words from the console, the same warning. But this time, it wasn't a message. It was a command. A warning that had come too late. The station convulsed violently. The ceiling groaned as fractures spread through the metal. The passage behind them collapsed in a spray of debris, cutting off their only escape route. Morovec was already pulling Zeeth back. We need to go. Now. But the figure took another step, its presence distorting the space around it. Then it spoke again, its voice carrying the weight of something ancient, something vast. You have broken the seal. Zeeth's stomach dropped. The station had never been abandoned. It had been a tomb. And now, they had opened it.